Have you heard of sensitivity readers? Well, if you haven't, you're going to hear about them now. If you have, you are going to hear why I firmly believe that sensitivity readers are going to shut down our civilization as efficiently, if somewhat more slowly, the nuclear bombs going off over our cities. I'm serious. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not using hyperbole. Sensitivity readers are so poisonous to our society. They are going to be so damaging that they should be made illegal. And that's not an exaggeration either. At least that's the way I feel about it. They are really going to destroy our society. And to illustrate that, I'm going to be talking about the furore that's blown up about Roald Dahl works, which Puffin books, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to put through the sensitivity reader meat grinder to remove all the potentially offensive words and descriptions that Dahl used. Well, you may say, what does a children's fairy story have to do with the end of our civilization? And I'm going to explain why. And I'm going to start actually with telling you how the photocopying machine took 30 years to destroy Soviet civilization. Oh yes, it's all bound together. But before I get onto that, I'll tell you that I'm granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I am also on Twitter, where I am at granniopteryx, and it's on at granniopteryx that I let you know when I've uploaded a new video. I also occasionally put in some extremely witty comments and observations, so that's a bonus. You can help my channel by liking it and by sharing this video. And this video, please share it. Find a politician to share it with. It really is so important. At least not the video itself, but what I'm saying about sensitivity readers. Like, share, subscribe. Remember, YouTube drops subscriptions, so it's an idea for you to check if your subscription is still active. Yeah, and you can help me financially. All the links to everything I've just spoken about are in the description, including the Buy Me a Coffee and the other 2 links you can use to donate if you feel so inclined. But really the most important thing is like. Okay. The Xerox machine, the photocopier that we know now, was commonly used by 1959. There was still other means of photocopying, but between 1959 and I don't know what, 1964 or 5, the photocopier had taken over. Now, there's something called samizdat literature in Russia. For instance, George Orwell's Animal Farm, or 1984. I think 1984 was not legal in Russia, in the Soviet Union, because it gave people funny ideas about communism and state control. So you couldn't get copies of it. But there were people who still wanted to read it. So they would laboriously type out copies of the book, and then it would be circulated in bundles to friends and trusted colleagues. When the photocopier came in, this posed a huge problem for the Soviet Union, because it meant, the samizdat literature would circulate round a very limited number of people, because, typing out a book, that's a colossal task. And it took a lot of time, and then you could only have 1 copy. Maybe you might make a carbon or 2, but that was as far as it would go. But with a photocopier, you could churn out dozens of copies overnight. So the Soviet Union found the Xerox machine, or whatever other photocopier they had available, to be a huge problem. And that's why they had only a few. And if you wanted to make copies, you had to go to some commissar or bureaucrat, and you'd have to get permission, and you'd have to say, well, I want to photocopy it from page 231 to page 235. And then if you discovered you had to do 236 as well, you had to get another chitty for that. And you had to go into a locked room to access it. And because of that, can you imagine? The photocopier was the first generally available machine where information could be transported really quickly. So Russia, or the Soviet Union and America may have been more or less equal technologically in 1959. But then, as the photocopier became more used, not only in literature, but in science, America started to pull ahead. And instead of finding new scientific theories or circulating new scientific theories, a lot of Soviet resources were spent on inventing photocopiers that would copy only on certain sorts of paper, or photocopier paper that would accept only copies from certain approved machines. I'm serious. Well, of course, Russia lost a lot of ground that way and ended up running into the buffers, which is why in 1989 it ground to a complete halt and collapsed. And it collapsed in a horrible way. The 1990s were just awful for the poor bloody Russians. Their money disappeared, jobs disappeared, the education system broke down, the legal system broke down. And it all happened because the civilization had ground to a halt. It could not go forward. And that was in great part because of the photocopier. There were other things as well. Now, a day or so ago, I was talking to Grammar-splaining. I don't know whether the video is going up or not. We had some trouble with Zoom, but it will go up if it becomes available. We were talking about sensitivity readers and the storm that's blown up over the Roald Dahl stories. Now, they found a nice name for them, sensitivity readers. I prefer to call them commissars, and they are there to protect the publisher's investment. They don't want to be sued. They don't want demonstrations in the car park outside their offices, and they don't want to be socially cancelled. So let me read this bit. Publishers hire sensitivity readers to offer an extra layer of editorial oversight. Well, actually what it means is a muzzle. And usually before a book is published, of course. Their individual areas of expertise usually match their own identities or experiences. And this is what it says: a given ethnicity, disability or sexual orientation, which publishers hope makes them best qualified to spot troublesome phrasing. Now, there's a significant omission here, isn't there? You know, they may have the disability or they may have the ethnicity or whatever. What they don't have is literary ability. And now we get on to the Roald Dahl furore. Now, Dahl was a terrible man. Many children's writers seem to be terrible people. And that's probably because children are savages. And writers for children are often, they have that childish savageness as well. And Dahl was no exception. Now, I'm going to read to you from The Witches, well, part of it, the opening, which is a Roald Dahl book. And it says here, a note about witches. In fairy tales, witches always wear silly black hats and black cloaks, and they ride on broomsticks. But this is not a fairy tale. This is about real witches. The most important thing you should know about real witches is this. Real witches dress in ordinary clothes and look very much like ordinary women. They live in ordinary houses and they work in ordinary jobs. Just let's remember that. Ordinary jobs. Yeah, this is what Dahl says. That is why they are so hard to catch. A real witch hates children with a red-hot, sizzling hatred that is more sizzling and red-hot than any hatred you could possibly imagine. A real witch spends all her time plotting to get rid of children in her particular territory. Let's see. Her passion is to do away with them one by one. It's all she thinks about the whole day long. Even if she is working as a cashier in a supermarket or typing letters for a businessman. Okay, that's the opening note to Dahl's The Witches. Let's just look at that, because what happened was that when Puffin reissued this book, these words were substituted. Her passion is to do away with them one by one. It is all she thinks about the whole day long, even if she is working as a cashier in a supermarket or typing letters for a businessman. And the sensitivity reader said, even if she is working as a top scientist or running a successful business, something like that. I don't have the exact words, but top scientist was what really caught me. Now, this is straight after Dahl says ordinary jobs. So this sensitivity reader hasn't even absorbed the previous paragraph. And so it makes no sense, because being a top scientist is not an ordinary job. It's not an ordinary job for anyone. You can't be a top scientist. You might be an ordinary scientist, but you can't be a top scientist. And I'll get onto what a top scientist is in a minute, but I'm sure you get my drift. Okay, so when I was talking to Grammar-splaining about this the other day, I described that wording, top scientist, successful business, I describe that as banal. So I'm going to tell you why it's banal. Well, you probably worked it out for yourselves, but I'll go through it anyway. It's flabby and it's vague. What is meant by scientist? I mean, that's just anything. An astronomer, a biochemist, heaven help us. A sociologist, well, those are called the social scientists, aren't they? So let's speculate what's going on in the mind of the sensitivity reader who uses the words top scientist. Well, science sounds important, but I can't be bothered to work out what sort of science it is. I mean, going to Google to look for some suggestions, that's too much like hard work. So I'll just say scientist. And right, okay, well, scientist may not be enough. Top scientist. What does top mean anyway? Top of a profession? Top in what way? Most papers published? Head of a school? The sort who gets interviews on TV shows? Well, obviously, the person who wrote this top scientist stuff doesn't know what being a top scientist is, but it sounds good. Flabby, vague thinking. And actually, this reminds me of a Star Trek. Hang on a minute. There was a Next Generation episode where a group of weird-looking aliens sent out some sort of an emergency signal, and they got in touch with the Enterprise, and there was something wrong with their ship, and all they could say was, "It's broken." They didn't know how to work it. And Geordie went over there and he worked out what was wrong. They kidnapped him. And then it took the Enterprise a while to get Geordie back. But these people didn't know how to operate their own machinery anymore. Or maybe it was stolen from somebody else. It's broken. That's all they could say about it. And of course, they'd have ended up dying if they hadn't happened on the Enterprise. Now, let's get back to the non-vagueness of Dahl's prose. A supermarket cashier or a typist, well, you know what they are, don't you? You are fully aware of what they do. There's something else. The whole point of them being a supermarket cashier or a typist is their very ordinariness. That's what Dahl was saying. The anonymity and the forgettability of their jobs. You know, a top scientist or a captain of industry, you're going to notice them, aren't you? And then let's think of the effect on children. Oh no, this is getting in the way. The effect this is going to have on children. Yeah? How many children actually meet top scientists day to day, or even captains of industry? But how often do they meet supermarket cashiers? So, having read this story, the child then has every trip to the supermarket, would have had a frisson of excitement. That nice cashier who always smiles at me as mum's checking through the muesli and the vegetarian sausages. Could it be? Well, could it? And that's the magic of Dahl, which has been completely destroyed by that sensitivity reader. But I just want to end by reminding you, it's not just literature. When these sensitivity readers are given scientific papers to deal with, they will muffle them in just the same way as that photocopier was muffled in the Soviet Union. And do you think it won't happen? Of course it'll happen. Because when you've got these people, they will get more and more power, and the publishers will become more and more afraid of them. And it will end up with our civilization running into the buffers. Might take a few years. I might be gone by then, but it will happen. And that's why sensitivity readers should be abolished at once and completely. Right. Till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.